Welcome to Shelving Cart. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Teddy.
And we're both librarians here to have a podcast book club with each other and all of you. On Shelving Cart, we talk about books like it's a 1-hour book club meeting, so we talk about likes, dislikes, reviews, general feelings, and more.
And generally completely spoil the book, so be warned.
And today we are going to be discussing Borne by Jeff VanderMeer.
Ow, ow! Not to spoil my feelings about the book at all. But Sarah, have you ever read anything by Jeff VanderMeer before?
This is my first. I've seen the Annihilation movie.
Ugh. Okay. We'll talk about that.
That's it. That's my only connection. And that this book has been on my bookshelf for the past 4 years. So
to clarify, it is a friend of mine's copy of the book that has been sitting on Sarah's shelf at my refusal to believe that Sarah would not read a book that I recommended.
I read it. It just took a while.
You super did.
Yeah.
Great. Excellent.
All right. Well, you have read other books besides this by Jeff VanderMeer?
Yes. So I've read this book before. I read it in 2020. And then I also have read Annihilation.
Okay.
I started but did not finish another book of his called Dead Astronauts. That's actually the sequel-ish kind of thing to this book. But if you can believe it, it was incomprehensibly weirder than this book.
I can't believe it. But I can.
Yeah, Annihilation I thought was so good. There was a point when I was reading Annihilation that I literally left it face down on my coffee table for 3 days because I was too scared to keep going.
Yeah.
That's how good Annihilation was for me. So overall, I have very positive feelings about Jeffy. Jeff VanderMeer is an author, editor, and literary critic. He was born in Pennsylvania, shout out to Philly, but spent his childhood in the Fiji Islands because his parents were in the Peace Corps. And that, I think, informs this book in an interesting way.
Yeah.
He returned to the United States and attended the University of Florida and then took part in the Clarion Writers Workshop, which I think is a big deal, in 1992. I've never read this book, but he credits Angela Carter's novel, The Infernal Desire Machines of Dr. Hoffman, with blowing the back of his head off and rewiring his brain in terms of writing.
Okay.
So that's a pretty strong endorsement. I put it on my TBR. We will see if it's that good. So he is what's called a new weird author, and that's a genre that sort of crosses boundary lines. It incorporates horror and speculative fiction, but it's not married to either of those two things, and started in the 80s and 90s. You can sort of think of Alistair Reynolds, if you know who that is, or China Mayville? Embassy Town, the author of Embassy Town.
Okay. I don't know
great.
either of these, so.
Okay, love it. So this is really, I think this might be your first weird fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you think that's accurate?
Probably. I don't know. It's hard to say. Not really.
Yeah.
Yeah. In this specific type, sci-fi setting, weird fiction situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's part of it is it needs to be at least in some way speculative, and whether or not that sci-fi is up for debate.
Yeah.
But the New Yorker did call him the king of weird fiction. So he's definitely the granddaddy of the genre.
Yeah.
He began writing in the late 1980s and was a prolific contributor to small press magazines, which published his horror and fantasy short stories. So if you can, he was just really typing away.
Yeah.
And I think that's a cute backstory for him, that he was just publishing all these short stories in magazines and stuff. So when he writes, it's my impression that he likes to hang around in the same world for a while with all of his stuff. So Shriek, Finch, and City of Saints and Mad Men are all set in the same place, which is this imaginary city of ambergris, or ambergris, however you pronounce what comes out of a whale. And then Borne, Dead Astronauts, and The Strange Bird, A Borne Story are all in this universe that we're about to discuss. So he'll hang around. He has a lot of thoughts about a specific place as he comes up with it. He also edits anthologies with his wife, Anne VanderMeer, who is like an incredible editor.
Yeah.
And is like very famous in her own right. In 2014, he published the Southern Reach trilogy, I think like all in one year. So it was kind of like a publisher's gimmick that it wasn't just like one big long book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see.
It starts with Annihilation, which won the Nebula and Shirley Jackson Awards for Best Novel. Huge deal.
Shirley Jackson,
and then
the Queen.
The Queen, yes. And then it was adapted into a film starring Natalie Portman, which was bad.
If you hadn't read the book, I liked that movie. Like, no book context. So.
Oh, I hated it so much, but that's okay. No judgment if you liked it, obviously. But he's also a teacher and is involved with Shared World, which is an annual 2-week program that aims to teach creative writing to teenagers.
Oh.
And he has written several creative writing guides, which I think is hilarious because I think of those as like, I don't know, just like very like straightforward or like marketable, how to write marketable writing. And I don't think Jeff knows what marketable is if it slapped him in the face. Doesn't
Ursula K. Le Guin have a writing guide book too?
Okay. Ursula's book though is about like the beauty of fiction.
Oh,
like
okay.
It's like
okay.
Right. It's like yes, and it's also more than that because it's Ursula K. Le Guin.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I was like,
so like I don't know. I haven't investigated Jeff's,
Yeah.
and it very well could be in a similar vein.
Yeah.
But I guess I'll read the book jacket also.
yeah, go. Yeah, do book jacket. Absolutely.
Okay. So, book jacket starts with a quote. "Am I a person?" Borne asked me. "Yes, you are a person," I told him. "But like a person, you can be a weapon too." In Borne, a young woman named Rachel survives as a scavenger in a ruined city half destroyed by drought and conflict. The city is dangerous, littered with discarded experiments from the company, a biotech firm now derelict, and punished by unpredictable predations of a giant bear. Rachel ekes out an existence in the shelter of a rundown sanctuary she shares with her partner, Wick, who deals his own homegrown psychoactive biotech. One day, Rachel finds Borne during a scavenging mission and takes him home. Borne as salvage is little more than a green lump, plant or animal, but exudes a strange charisma. Borne reminds Rachel of the marine life from the island nation of her birth, now lost to rising seas. There is an attachment she resents. In this world, any weakness can kill you. Yet, against her instincts and definitely against Wick's wishes, Rachel keeps Borne. She cannot help herself. Borne, learning to speak, learning about the world, is fun to be with, and in a world so broken that innocence is a precious thing. For Borne makes Rachel see beauty in the desolation around her. She begins to feel a protectiveness she can ill afford. He was born, but I had borne him. Borne with an E, which is how you spell his little name. But as Borne grows, he begins to threaten the balance of power in the city and to put the security of her sanctuary with Wick at risk. For the company, it seems, may not be truly dead, and new enemies are creeping in. What Borne will lay bare to Rachel as he changes is how precarious her existence has been and how dependent on subterfuge and secrets. In the aftermath, nothing will be the same. So.
That's a good jacket.
Yeah. I think it accurately describes what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay. Every review on the back is about Annihilation.
Wait, really? Mine aren't. So, do you want one of mine?
Well, okay. Here's what I will say: is that Stephen King called the Southern Reach trilogy creepy and fascinating, and that N.K. Jemisin on Authority, which I believe is the second or third book, in Southern Reach, said, "More than just a horror novel, there's something Poe-like in this tightening, increasingly paranoid focus, but where Poe kept his most vicious blows relatively oblique, VanderMeer drives them deep, albeit in a corkscrewing way that is no less cruel and exquisite." Which is the most prosy I have ever heard N.K. Jemisin give a review. Like,
Yeah.
it's just so funny in that it like sounds like Jeff VanderMeer. What are your Borne related reviews?
Jeff VanderMeer's Southern Reach trilogy was an ever-creeping map of the apocalypse. With Borne, he continues his investigation into the malevolent grace of the world, and it's a thorough marvel.
I love Colson Whitehead.
Let's see. Supremely literary, distinctly unusual, VanderMeer's deep talent for world building takes him into realms more reminiscent of Cormac McCarthy's The Road than of The Shire. Superb. That's from Kirkus Reviews.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow. That's some good reader's advisory, actually. That's not what I had written down, but if you liked Borne, you should probably read The Road. Less aliens, but similar apocalypse literary fiction.
Do you have GoodReads reviews?
This is hilarious. I have my own review from 2020.
Oh, amazing. Okay.
So I read this at the beginning of the pandemic, which will inform the first sentence.
Yeah.
I began reading Borne as an attempt to turn my attention to something that wasn't about a global crisis. But ended up actually terrified that this book is a prescient warning about the end of the world. VanderMeer did something with Borne that he was not able to do in the Southern Reach trilogy, although those were also excellent at eliciting fear. But Borne, I finished terrified and terribly happy. This surrealist science fiction novel is a game changer for science fiction geeks who think they've seen it all. They haven't. That's my 5-star review from 2020.
That's a good review. I like how you wrote
Thanks.
that one. I think
Thanks
that
so
you
much.
you gave me this book to read during 2020, and I think that's why I couldn't read it. I think I kept trying, and I
Valid.
was like, "No way."
Yeah.
No
Okay,
way.
that's really valid. Wynn says this about me all the time too, where Wynn is like, I don't understand how, as the world is like literally burning, you are able to read apocalyptic fiction. And I am like, I love it so much.
Yeah, I like it too, but I do get that. I get itchy. I get really, really uncomfortable. I get lost in my feelings of being one person only. You know, like I'm only
No.
one person. Like I can't do anything. Like it's like I'm like this is feels so beyond my control that I'm like I don't know what to do because I agree with the things that I read and I'm like, but what? You know, it's very existential for me personally to read it. I have given up on many an apocalyptic fiction.
Valid.
But it depends.
Yeah. My other report backs from GoodReads
Okay.
are that it feels like everyone who is a Jeff VanderMeer fan feels the need to write a small essay as a review on
Oh,
GoodReads.
God.
Like all of them are like intensely long.
Yours
so
was
if
nice
they-
and concise.
Mine was short, but everyone else was like, Mom. But I was like feeling a little naughty and looked at the 1-star reviews
Oh, yeah.
specifically because
Yeah.
I was like, what's going on for people who did not like this book? Because that's so far from my own experience
Yeah.
that I was like, what's going on? So somebody said, thought this book would be right up my alley based on the description, so I was surprised and disappointed that I hated it so much. The plot, such as it was, made no sense. The reactions of characters to events made no sense. Every interesting idea was taken about 3 steps too far in the wrong direction, and on a sentence level, it was even worse. Pretentious, thesaurus-infused prose that never failed to use multiple, sometimes contradictory modifiers when one would do the trick. This was my first and last by this author.
Ooh.
Damn.
Oof.
I know.
Oof.
Ouch. Ouchie. This one was short and sweet. I came for full-on sci-fi horror after reading the Annihilation trilogy. I left with a YA-friendly story about a giant talking squid. What YA-friendly? Like, what? I am super not convinced that this is YA-friendly.
I just It's not YA, but that just sounds like genre fiction getting shoved somewhere to me. With
Valid.
not enough violent, like there's violence in this book, but with not enough like I don't know.
Gore?
Yeah, gore, I would say. Cuz I haven't read Annihilation, but I'm assuming there's more of that in there.
I just like don't even think that's true.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on. Like, Annihilation also had like weird, creepy animals and
Yeah.
like, I don't know.
Maybe a little more,
I
just
just
more
don't-
scary, whereas Borne isn't necessarily super frightening all the time, you know?
I know. I just feel like if you're not into existential questions about the universe, and you liked Annihilation, you just read Annihilation wrong. Like, that's not my fault. Like, just
Yeah. I get what you're saying. So should we just roll into it? Roll into
Yeah.
our discussion?
yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay, cool. We can talk about the characters. In our list, we have the company as a character, which I think is very valid because it's like the overarching kind of like ominous thing of the book. So the company is a now defunct company that was creating biotech, which biotech is biological, like human or like living matter infused technology, basically. And they took over this nebulous city that our setting is, and they did a lot of things to fuck up the city. At first they came and they were like giving people jobs, everything, and then what the city was doing was causing the effective pollution and all the bad things in the city to happen, basically.
Yeah.
Beyond just the general context of the rest of the world.
Valid.
Yeah. That's the company.
I would also like to add that the company building is just this like giant egg.
Yeah.
So there's definitely something in there about like hatching or like
Yeah.
looming like change
Yeah.
in that it's and like fertility stuff, like whatever, but it's just like a giant white egg.
So that's the company. Then we have Mord. Mord is a 5-story tall bear who can fly.
I thought he was 10 stories
think it's
tall. Is he 5
Five
stories
five
tall?
stories, yeah.
Well,
5 isn't good enough for you.
no, it's not.
It can be 10 stories in your head. That's fine.
Yeah. Headcanon.
He's 5 stories tall and he flies. He was a company creation, so he's supposed to kind of protect the company, but in fact, he doesn't always do that. He is a piece of biotech, technically. I don't have that much about him, so go for it. I know you're.
Mord is the love of my life. I am just so obsessed with Mord. He's huge and he flies and he's literally just a bear and he just like does violent bear shit. At like various points in the story, he like floats ominously overhead.
Yeah.
I would say like my big shit about about Mord that I love is this idea of like Mord as saint. Like there's this idea of like Mord as deity that is like so stunning. In his like first introductory, like we wake up in the book to Rachel, who we will discuss momentarily, like climbing Mord to scavenge shit that gets stuck in his fur. And she's talking about like, oh, like, you know, following Mord and scavenging is like an option. And she says, as with life generally, you never knew. So you followed head down in genuflection, hoping Mord would provide. And it's like, oh yeah, like nasty, violent God. Like, ugh, I love him. And his names were many and often miraculous to those who uttered them aloud. So like, Mord in some cases clearly has been Voldemorted.
Yeah.
Like he is like who shall not be named.
Yeah.
Like that is Mord, but other people don't call him Mord. They call him Seether, Seether. And he's just like a devious big guy.
Yeah.
And I just love the shit out of him.
Yeah. He's by pure size, he's randomly smiting people across the city. So yeah. Yep. And okay, so then we have Rachel. So Rachel is our POV character. She is our main character. She is a scavenger. A main plot point is that she cannot remember how she got into the city that we are in, and that it is implied that she was born on like a Pacific island of some kind. One of the Pacific Islands, perhaps. I'm assuming because that is where Jeff VanderMeer was living for a long time. In my head, it was Hawaii, because I was also in my head this was the United States, so I was assuming that the United States would only be taking other people from the United States as refugees, as you do. Yes. So Rachel grew up with her parents on Hawaii, I'm assuming in my head, or an island of any kind, and she describes watching like the other islands disappearing around her, which was also my Hawaii decision because they're close together. And as the sea level's rising, they are on the move, as things get worse and worse. But she can't remember how. She just remembers waking up one day in the city she's in. Rachel lives with Wick, her boyfriend.
Rachel scavenges what Wick needs for his practice. They have sort of like a symbiotic relationship. When she describes Wick, she describes him as my partner and lover both. So it's like they're both in it together to survive together, and also like they're a little in love. And her contribution to their relationship is that she like goes out into the city and finds shit that could be useful to him. She is yeah, I mean, like, we'll talk about her more in relation to Borne. It's like there's shit about her, but like I think the main deal is that like she remembers her childhood, then there's a chunk missing, and then she wakes up and she's in the city and she teams up with Wick.
Yeah, she's also our resident like cool girl character. She is the tried and tough character who has a very individualistic approach at the beginning of the book. She's very focused on the individual. Okay, then we get Wick. Wick, as we mentioned, is partner and lover to Rachel. And Wick is a drug dealer. That is how we were introduced to Wick. He's a drug dealer. That's what Rachel says. And by that, he deals memory beetles that help people put into their ears, and that they like add new memories, take away memories, things like that. Kind of the escapism drug of the moment. And he used to work for the company. And that was how he ended up with a bunch of biotech, and then he fiddles around with biotech now and collects it. Wick and Rachel live in the Balcony Cliffs, which is a converted hotel into like their sanctuary, basically. Anything else to add for Wick except for what we get to at the end of the story?
Yeah, I won't get into that. Just that we know that Wick is sick. He like literally has worms living in his body that like that alert him to like medical issues that he's having as the result of this like unknown chronic illness. And then also just that when you say Wick fiddles around with biotech, like yes, he super does. And the way he does that is that he has the hotel had a swimming pool that is now just Wick's giant vat that he stirs like a mad magician in the night, and it like glows and is like creepy. So Wick also has an air of like mad scientist about him. Yeah.
We don't like get a very deep Wick Rachel connection for like the first act of the book. It's very like separated. Okay, and then our last like main character is the magician, who is another drug dealer / biotech dealer. She has a gang of mutant children that she uses as weapons across the city. And she keeps trying to get Wick and Rachel to join her, which they have held out on doing so far. And she was integral in a very important part of Rachel and Wick's story.
Yes, let's leave it there.
The
I mean,
magician has her hands in everything, and we
yes.
don't know it for a long time.
Right. And then also I will just say that like as she grows in power, it's sort of like a battle. There's a mid book, like second act.
Yeah.
The battle is really between Mord and the magician.
Yeah.
She's like trying to take him down.
She's trying to take down Mord. I would say if we need a reference back to something that we have read on this podcast, is she is our President Coin of the book.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so valid.
She is the one who has the right ideas but has the absolute wrong methods for going about things. I said the magician was the last character, but I obviously forgot our titular character, Borne. Oopsies. So, Borne is found on Mord's left flank, I believe, by Rachel while she's scavenging, and he looks like a vase slash what's it, a vase?
When she finds him, he looks like a sea anemone.
Oh yeah, a sea anemone. And he is a purple blob that she takes home as scavenge. But she likes him. She takes a liking to him. Earlier you said in the book summary that he has charisma, and it's Borne has Riz. That's the situation. Borne is rizzed up. That's the thing.
So he like emits attractive smells.
Yes, he emits an attractive smell to her. She kind of thinks he looks like a house plant. Like she's like, he must be a plant. So she ends up keeping Borne, but he's just kind of an amorphous blob, really. And he, as we get to know him, he grows as he consumes things, whether that means eating them or keeping them alive inside of him.
Up for debate.
He gets bigger and bigger as the book goes on. He learns how to talk. He knows how to read, all this stuff. He is very endearing and very scary at the same time. And he's very much the Iron Giant coded, where he's like like, what is it? Like, don't at the end of the Iron Giant, where he's like, I'm a superhero. Like, he decides he's a superhero and not a weapon. And he turns out to, yeah.
I cannot believe that you just said that Borne was Iron Giant coded, and I didn't think of that myself. Like, that's so true.
That's probably why somebody said it was YA.
It's
coded.
absurd.
Like that it was YA.
Some additional thoughts about
Borne. Is so like infantile.
You mentioned this that
murderous
he like eats shit. He calls it
tendencies,
sampling,
yeah,
which I think is like the cutest possible thing. Just like having a little nibble, but he, yeah.
Yeah.
Tendencies, right. Yeah, necessities. Yeah. I think the cute thing about how like we sort of get alerted to Borne's potential dangerousness is that Wick is like, hi, everything that used to live here is gone.
Yeah.
Like there are no more lizards,
and
there are
lizards.
No more spiders. Rachel is like, yeah, my compost worms are gone. Like he just eats shit. So, and he like, this is just a cute factoid, is that he loves compost worms. He just like loves to eat them. And he loves the lizards. And he's just right. Like, I think Borne's growth over the series is like over the book is like intensely sad and also so fucking cute. Like, he is just like, you know when you have a pet and you're like, what's your little internal monologue?
He is terrifying because
like,
he grows.
What are you thinking about right now?
Okay.
Borne
those are our cast
like,
of characters.
He's just a guy, and he
one.
loves
So,
words.
shall I hit you with the
you know,
plot
and he
overview?
loves like playing with words. I love Borne. Borne is so cute.
I would love to
He's
take
also
credit for
terrifying.
this book overview, but I took it off of bookrags.com because I usually look for a synopsis to then write my review based off of, or write my plot summary off of. But this one was really succinct, and I was like, I'm not going to do it any better than that. So bookrags.com. All right. So our book opens on a post-apocalyptic city with our narrator, Rachel, and Rachel with her drug dealer boyfriend Wick live in an abandoned hotel called the Balcony Cliffs.
Great.
The city
Yeah.
is haunted by a giant flying bear named Mord. Rachel discovers an object on Mord, something that looks like a cross between a vase and a sea anemone. Rachel takes Borne to her home, and we learn that Wick has a rival named the Magician who also used to work for the company. We learn that Rachel grew up on an island with her parents and then traveled with them seeking safety as the apocalypse set in. She cannot remember how they died or how she came to the city. Shortly after bringing Borne home, Rachel is attacked in the Balcony Cliffs by a group of feral children who are absolutely terrifying. After they leave, Borne speaks to Rachel for some time, and Borne begins to change in appearance, sprouting eyes and growing ever larger. And he tells Rachel that he killed the children who attacked her. Wick warns Rachel that Borne might have come from the company and could be dangerous, but Rachel ignores these warnings as she has begun to love Borne. Borne asks for his own apartment in the Balcony Cliffs, and then he and Rachel go out into the city and hide on the rooftop of an abandoned factory where they hear a group of feral children approaching. Rachel watches through a hole in the roof as the children are set upon by Mord proxies, which are smaller, more vicious versions of the giant flying bear. The proxies annihilate the children, and one heads towards the roof. Borne disguises himself as a giant rock surrounding Rachel, keeping her safely inside of him. When they return to the Balcony Cliffs, Wick warns Rachel that Borne is a danger to them. He also tells her that the magician has demanded that they give her the Balcony Cliffs and everything in it, and he has to do as she says, because he is ill and she gives him the medicine he needs to survive. After having seen the magician's insignia on one of the children in the factory, Rachel realizes that the children who attacked her worked for the magician, and Wick knew that all along. One day, Wick takes Rachel to the roof of the Balcony Cliffs because he heard the magician was planning something. They watch as her people fire a missile from her stronghold, striking Mord in the head and injuring him. Later, when Rachel is unable to sleep, she visits Wick during the night and sees herself there, already talking to him. She realizes that Borne has been disguising himself as both her and Wick. He was doing this to try to make peace between them, but Rachel feels violated, which is valid, and tells Borne he must leave the Balcony Cliffs, though it breaks her heart to do so. Once he is gone, Rachel goes through his room and finds a journal in which Borne admits that he must kill and consume his prey in order to survive, and that he has struggled to control his impulses and to not hurt Rachel. Shortly thereafter, Rachel and Wick are chased out of the Balcony Cliffs by Mord proxies. They rest briefly in a nearby well, where Wick realizes he has left his medicine behind. They must go to the company building and search for more medicine. Wick gives Rachel a letter that she is to read in the event of his death. On the way to the company building, Borne visits Rachel and tells her that he has been killing Mord proxies and evil people only, and that he has a plan to make everything better. He then disguises himself as Mord and goes chasing after the giant bear. They begin to clash. Inside the company building, Rachel finds the medicine and gives it to Wick, whose condition is rapidly deteriorating. She follows a set of footprints into a room with a giant silver portal on the wall. The magician is there and explains that the company used the portal to get supplies into the city. She asks Rachel to join her her cause to take over the city. Instead, Rachel kills her, beating her over the head with a rock. Inside the room with the portal, Rachel discovers boxes and boxes of identical Bornes, as well as a discarded human-like biotech, all which have Wick's face, because Wick is biotech. She was prepared for this, though, because she had already read his letter in which he admitted that he was not human. He further told her in the letter that he had given her memory beetles at her request to make her forget the deaths of her parents, who were killed by company employees after having entered the city by stowing away in boxes. Through the portal. Back outside, Rachel and Wick watch as Borne defeats Mord by transforming into a sea-like expanse of skin and absorbing Mord. They both disappear, and in the aftermath, the city sprouts new plant and animal life.
Through the portal.
Rachel and Wick return to the Balcony Cliffs, but they invite others to join them. Having learned to love and nurture from her experience with Borne, Rachel becomes a mother figure to some orphan children, and she has a little baby piece of Borne that never moves. The end. The end. Yes.
The end. Oh my god. I honestly, that was like
Yes,
long,
absolutely.
but truly
And it's only like
every
300 something
every other
pages.
sentence I was like, well, what about
And
this? Like,
it's
there's
like
so much in this
there's
book
not a lot of
that
there's
it's
not
like
a lot of fat
impossible to
in the book,
condense.
so
Like,
to
just
speak.
fucking read
So
it. You already know. Like, it is so expansive. Somehow. Yeah. Did you like it?
okay, I don't know.
Sarah gave it a 3-star on GoodReads. I
I've been
did see
holding that in. I will say that if you on Storygraph, I gave it 3.75 stars, which is very different.
That is so different.
I don't.
That's so different.
The best thing about Storygraph is that you can do fraction stars, and that is really
It's just too much thinking.
It's very important to me now. Okay, so I don't know. I liked the first act and the third act quite a bit, but I found the second act to be like a little personally too philosophical. Did I?
Hit me with what the second act is, from when to when.
So, well, in the book is divided into those actual 3 parts. It's like Rachel begins to realize that she's loving Borne. It's like before Borne ever leaves the house. And then we get like the Mord proxies, Borne moving out, him following on the salvage, all that stuff. I don't necessarily think I disliked like what the book was doing, if that makes sense. Like, I didn't dislike any of the content of the book, but my enjoyment kind of was low, if that makes sense. There's a difference. Like I appreciate the book on a literary level. I don't think that there's anything necessarily bad about the book, but I rated it purely on like how much I was like came away from it being like I enjoyed my experience of reading it.
Which is how you should rate books, to be clear.
Yeah.
Like, literary classics, fuck it if you didn't have a good time.
No,
like,
absolutely.
For
But
sure.
I don't think there's necessarily anything I can super fault with the book. I would say where I disliked it the most was the second act. But when we're talking about it, like the themes and the characters, I'm like, I liked the characters, and I really liked dialogue in the books. I really liked the dialogue sequences. I felt like that was my favorite part. I think that's because I tend to prefer with like a little bit more of a sparser fiction. Like, I like a little bit more of I like a minimalist kind of approach to things. And I tend to like a lot of my character growth through dialogue and like interactions with other characters to see how things grow, which we get a lot of that in this book. But then it's like we get a section of it, like a dialogue section, and then we get like 30 pages of philosophy about it. You know what I mean? Like, you get a couple pages more of like diving into it, which I think is fine. But I also don't love first person fiction very much these days either. So that's part of it, I think, too. However, as first person fiction goes, I think this is one that I liked a lot more and much more well done in that regard. So yeah, I have mixed feelings about it. Hence the three. I was like, it's like a 5-star for like the themes and everything, but for how I felt when I was reading it, it's like closer to 3-4 ish. Yeah,
Valid. Yeah.
but we heard your review, so I know that you love this book.
Literally, this is my favorite book of all time.
What?
Literally, Sarah, I'm obsessed with this
Oh
book.
my God.
Like, when I pitched it for the podcast, I was like, be cool, be cool, be cool. Like, I love this book. I cannot express to you, Borne changed my life. It taught me what a book could be. Talk about blowing the back of my head off.
Yeah.
Borne did that for me. I love this book. I think it opened my eyes to how cool science fiction and speculative fiction could be. And I think I just need to read more new weird fiction.
Yeah.
But I am just obsessed with it. I think the characterizations are so stunning.
Yeah.
And I also loved that it was fucking confusing. Like, this book trusts you not to be a fucking idiot. And like, if you don't get it, that's valid because it's like hard, but it is not going to be like, okay, I'll baby walk you through. There are no moments of babying you in the entire book. Like, we talked about this, I think a little what did we fucking read last week?
Last time when we read A Darker Shade of Magic.
Yes, there was a little bit of babying, right? Like
there was
a little bit of babying. A lot of babying, right? Like there was like you got that whole thing about Lila's eye, and then it was like, okay, and here's some more later about Lila's eye. He does not do that. There's none of that in Borne, and you're sort of left to your own devices to like figure out what the fuck the book is saying and like how it got there, and that's what I love it so much. And it's okay that we disagree.
But I don't think there are books that I read and I'm like, that's a fucking bad book. And people who are like, this is your favorite book. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You know what I mean? Like, here's a good example. Like, people who today in 2023 are like
2023 okay
2023 are like, Harry Potter is my favorite book. Like, one of them, doesn't matter which one. Like, you're like, that's my favorite book. Taking J.K. Rowling aside, right? Like, we throw her out the window, as she deserves. And we say, sorry.
We defenestrate J.K. Rowling, and then we still have problems.
And then you're like, it's Babe. I'm like, okay, read one other book, please. Or, like, this is going to be very polarizing. I don't really care. But, like, A Court of Thorns and Roses, I'm like, read another fucking book. Please. Please, God. Because A Court of Thorns and Roses, I've read it twice, and I enjoy reading it. But I'm like, is that a good book? No. Here, it's kind of the inverse, where I'm like, I didn't super enjoy reading it. I'm like, but this is a good book. For like, there are things that I really liked. It just wasn't like, it didn't hit the right spot for me all the way, you know. Right. So you being like, it's my favorite book, I'm not like, oh, you know, it's not like I'm like, oh, well, that's a bad opinion, you know what I mean? It's like a perfectly valid position, I think, to take on the book.
I think what we're trying to get at is that it is possible to like bad books and know that they're bad at the same time that it is possible to not like good books and know that they're good.
And I didn't even dislike this book. I just didn't love it, I would say.
Anything not covered that you liked or didn't like that you like need to get out right now.
I wrote this down for my dislikes. This is my literary ick, as they say.
Yes. I think I know what you're going to say.
I literally wrote it down on page 2.
Is it the reader line?
Yeah. What? Page 295. What would you have done, reader, who has been able to follow me like the magician followed me, invisible and ever watchful and without consequence? Ugh, I hate that shit. You know I hate it. I hate it. It just...
I reread it and was like, oh, fuck. Sarah's not gonna like this.
It makes me... I'm like... Again, we talked about this with the Hunger Games. Like, you don't need to know that I'm here. Before, it was just your journal. Like, before, this was Rachel's journal. And now I'm like, what's the greater universal implications for me existing in your universe? Like, I don't. Keep the fourth wall up. I don't need it.
I think, I hear you.
Yeah.
I think that this line could have been edited away, and that would have been fine. I think this might be, I might take it back. I think that's like the one moment where maybe Jeff also is babying, right? Like, I think that is also like, Jeff wants to call attention to like who has agency and like who is making powerful decisions and who is choosing not to do that. And then sort of like implicates you, the reader, as a way to like get you to think about it. But the trick is that we're kind of already thinking about it anyway. I also didn't love that line.
I love that you knew. I took a sticky note and I wrote boo in all caps.
Brutal. Yeah, like, but I knew, right, we've talked about this, and I was like, oh shit, there it goes, the fourth wall, she crumbled, like, it's not good. Valid ick.
Yeah, I will say I wrote down some quotes that I really liked.
Okay, hit me.
And then this was the other thing that I noted, is that this isn't more of a like or a dislike, but more of like a general note about this, is that I think a lot of post-apocalyptic literature is very macro, like very big sweeping. Like, again, our like touchstone for that would be the Hunger Games. It has a lot of really big themes that are about everybody, which this has it in it too, but it's explored in a way that's very micro, very individual level, which I thought was fascinating. I like think that it was very focused on what the individual can do to keep this kind of thing at bay, but it's still I was left feeling slightly unsatisfied by the conclusion, which is the question. I was thinking, like, how do you feel about kind of the solutions or the opposite of causing this chaos or destruction, like, that was offered by Jeff VanderMeer / the book itself, you know what I mean? So, like, because, like, again, in the Hunger Games, at the conclusion of that story, it's like we have President Coin, who we have to kill because she has turned evil as well. And, like, I don't know, kind of the solution was like democracy, you know what I mean?
Valid. I mean, one thing that I did not like about the end was the mommification of Rachel.
Yeah.
It's just like, leave her alone. Like, it's
Yeah.
okay. There's like this part at the end where, like, during her adventures, she like is crazed with grief and like goes out into the city, convinces herself that she's a ghost and goes looking for Borne. And she finds him, but in the context of like finding another scavenging camp that is like rife with children,
Yeah.
one of whom offers himself to be sold to the magician to ease the burden of that particular scavenging group. And then later at the end, this kid like shows up again as like one of Rachel's adopted children. And it's just sort of like, relax. We have explored Rachel as mother with Borne. I don't think we need like you to hit that hammer again. In terms of like what, I just am not convinced that like this book is offering any kind of solution to any problem posed. Like, I think that like, because it deals with things on such an individual level, it feels like happenstance that this, like, okay, when the magician dies, Rachel kills the magician via rock to the head.
Yeah.
Right? And then everything sort of resolves coincidentally. Like, it rains for a number of days, and that rain becomes like awakens flora, fauna, biotech that has been like slumbering for a long time. Some of it dies, some of it remains. Things are feeling better in the city at the end. But I'm not convinced that that's because of anything that Rachel does or anything necessarily even that Borne does. I think it's like it happens in a way that like does not suggest to me that VanderMeer is like, and an individual solved the crisis. Like, I am not, I think that like Rachel's arc and the world's arc mirror each other, but are not, like, Rachel's arc does not influence the world's arc. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just don't know if I necessarily agree. But I think I think it definitely, I don't think, first of all, I would say that I don't think it has to offer a solution. But second of all, I will say that there were a lot of themes that seemed to be offering some sort of implication or solution for like our world / her world. So like
Hit me. I'm losing you.
So this is Rachel about Borne is, maybe too, I realized then in that moment that I'd begun to love him because he didn't see the world like I saw the world. He didn't see the traps. And to me, and there was like a lot of quotes about that and about her loving Borne and how she goes from loving Borne and only being able to love Borne to then eventually admitting that she loves Wick, where previously this, she would not really admit that to herself and all of those things. And it seemed to me like Borne also was making a gesture out of love for Rachel by trying to kill Mord, and destroying Mord, and was like, I'm going to make this all better, Rachel. I think he says something like that before he goes off to fight Mord. And he's like, I'm going to go fix this because he wants to protect Mord.
Protect Rachel.
Protect Rachel. So I think that was like what I was wrestling with, was how that fits in greater to the story, because that's more like Borne literally kills Mord, and that, I mean, I guess it's not explicit that triggers those events. Like, it could be happenstance, but at the same time, I'm like, it's a book. So I'm like, nothing's happenstance, right? Not to get super meta with it.
Like,
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, I hear you. I get it. And I think that, like, love as a central theme is, like, valid. And, like, I just am wary of placing this in the category of media that is like, love solves capitalism. Like, I just don't think that that's the vibe.
I don't know, but because that's the vibe that I was getting that kind of keeps some of my reservations, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, okay. I hear you.
Yeah.
I do.
Because that's what I thought the stuff with the kids at the end was like being like, Rachel is not living in the world that she wants to live in, so she's gonna make a piece of it, like, of her own world now, because she, like, saw through Borne what it's like to care for somebody. So, like, all of that aside, like the mommyification aside, which I agree with, but, like, that's what it was kind of implying to me. But maybe it's possible I just read it, like, the genre and the plot itself too literally in that aspect.
I think that you're right. Like, I think that there is a trend that I actually credit with a lot of, like, America's inability to critically think about literature.
Yeah.
Which is, like, have you seen those things that are like, the English teacher is always trying to get you to write about why the curtains are blue? Like, sometimes the curtains are just blue. And it's like, the curtains are almost never just blue.
Yeah.
Like, relax.
Yeah.
Like, that's not true. And so I hear you, and I don't want to be like, the curtains are just blue. At the same time, I just do not believe that this is a book about, like, individual action, in that it is so micro-focused on Rachel and her relationship to Wick and her relationship to Borne.
Yeah.
That, like, I hesitate to believe that, like, right, and I'll say it again, like, that the narrative is that, like, love will solve capitalism. I think, like, because, like, Mord dies. Borne kills Mord.
Yeah.
And then a time after that, it rains a plentiful rain.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that there is enough in this, and also, maybe this is me being religious, like, it could fully be, like, being informed by that, but we've also seen the deification of Mord, to a certain extent, the deification of Borne.
Yeah.
Like, there's something almost, like, God generous, like, of this reign, that it almost, to me, the way I read it, was not like, and it will always work out fine, or, like, someone is going to take care of it, or, and love saves the day. It was more like, and sometimes shit just gets better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can see that too. I can definitely see, like, because maybe it didn't even rain like a cleansing rain as much as we think it did, but Rachel perceived it as more cleansing because she had experienced this big loving event, basically, and that changed her perspective of the city that she was in. So I think that could have also been the implication. I think there's that, and then I think what you said was valid, and it did kind of just sway me more into that, maybe more opinion. That's, like, kind of more of a middle ground, I think. But I think maybe what it is that I might not like post-apocalyptic fiction that doesn't offer an answer because it makes me feel too bad. You know what I mean? Yeah,
it
makes me feel itchy because I'm like, reading this, and not to sound whatever, self-actualized or whatever, I'm like, I already know that I am capable of feeling love and loving those around me and loving the people in my community, you know, things like that. But if I was in a post-apocalyptic world, I would just have to live through that. Like, you know, like that makes me feel itchy. And I appreciate, like, if you're already living in it, what do you do? Like, how do you take what you do have and turn it into something good? Not necessarily solve the problems for everyone else, but there's something about that I'm like, ugh, I feel like it needs to be covered in it, which I don't know if that makes sense at all. Like, it might be me thinking too black and white, but
I hear where you're coming from.
yeah.
And I think that is a valid thing to desire. I just don't think Jeffy's giving it to you. And I think I'm thriving with that. And
Yeah.
you're like, I hate it. And that is like, I think that's like a really good, like, decision point. Like, one of probably more than a few, but like
Yeah.
a good dividing line between like what we appreciate in our fiction, where I am like, thanks, no answer, perf.
Yeah.
And you're like, answer now.
Yeah.
Or like, answer, and the one that I found is not satisfying.
Yeah, or like the answer, it doesn't have to be spelled out, right? Like, it doesn't have to be
Sure.
a babied answer, you know?
No.
But I felt like the themes were leading me somewhere, or into like, I kept thinking we were heading towards some sort of revolution situation, and we were not, which is fine. But I was like, that's what I need. Like, I need to know that things, if things were like this, we would have the ability to, as a collective, get over some of these things. But again, I think that might be a literal interpretation of the genre, because a lot of post-apocalyptic fiction is that those things are happening right now anyway. So it's like what we are already in those situations at this moment. So
I also wonder, right, like if you are expecting a science fiction answer to what is not fundamentally a science fiction problem.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I think, like, because this is new weird,
Yeah.
even though we've included it in our science fiction season, like, I think because this is new weird, like, we might need to, like, adjust what we want from it.
Yeah.
In a different way. Like, this is not, I would not categorize this as what I will, like, lovingly call, like, didactic science fiction.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
it's not The Handmaid's Tale. It's not The Hunger Games.
Yeah.
It's, like,
It's definitely
something
not
else.
the Hunger Games.
It certainly isn't. And so, like, but I think that we're getting at, like, a very important part of the book, which is, like, what the fuck is this bitch trying to say?
Yeah. What I will come down pretty hard saying is that I think, like, the absence of Mord is, like, one of the most important things at the end, because Mord is, like, this terror that was created by this evil company that was creating friction in the city, as was the magician, that was causing chaos, destruction, violence, and pain in the city. And without those, like, immediate overlords, so to speak, like, you can get a little bit of relief from them, you know?
Okay, hot take. I actually think that if I'm gonna get, like, I think there are two possible ways to read this, and it's probably somewhere in the middle / a little bit of both.
Yeah.
But I will take your love is the answer to capitalism suggestion and read and add that it's like, yes, and violence.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
yes, and the brick. You know what I mean?
Oh,
like,
absolutely. Yeah.
right. So, like, I think insofar as, like, Borne is the brick, right?
Yeah.
So, like, maybe there is an answer in that, like, you need to learn to love everyone around you in a new way.
Yeah.
And also you need some kind of weapon. You need to fight somehow on behalf of that love.
Yes.
Which is what Borne does.
Yeah, we have our two behemoths through Borne and Mord is, like, on the side of the company, even though it is
Mord
nebulous.
Used to be a person.
Mord used to be a person, and it's nebulous. It's, like, times where, but he's just being a bear. You know what I mean? Like, it's his nature. He's just being a bear. And then we have Borne, who's going against his nature we have Borne on the side of all of the Rachels, who is going against the nature, but like, or like turning his nature into something that can fight against Mord. And so I do think we are getting some of that like solution perhaps through them, is like loving, like if we are going the love conquers capitalism, love conquers all Harry Potter situation on our hands, we will be like, it's also proposing, yeah, like you said, it's not just enough to do that though, because once
You gotta kill the Mord.
you gotta kill the Mord, because once Mord is gone, Rachel feels much, and the magician, we can't count out the magician. Once Mord and the magician are gone, these two corrupting powers in the city are out, and then Rachel feels capable of loving more and loving more of those around, because those powers aren't pitting each other against everybody against each other.
I will also say, like, there's something in here about trauma and abuse, right? Like, once you are no longer under the shadow of these things, you can become your fuller self.
Yeah.
And also capitalism is abuse.
Yeah.
Yum.
Yeah.
like, right? Like,
Yep.
so
Well,
there's
the
something
company,
of that in there too.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a pretty direct line. Like, is the company is the evil. If there's one thing that's babying in this book,
It's that it's just called the company.
the company. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
yeah.
nebulous company.
I mean, like, yes, like the nebulous evil company. Absolutely. Like, for sure. Right. Okay. Actually, this leads me into my question for you.
Yeah.
Which is like, how are we feeling about this book's commentary on personhood, and who do you fucking think was a person? Because there's a lot. Poor Borne is like, am I a person? Like, he just needs to know. Like, Rachel, am I a person? Am I a person? Like, he's constantly asking that.
Yeah.
And at the end of this book, like maybe the last like 50 pages, like the magician is dead, like we're finding out about the portal, Wick is biotech, like blah, blah, blah. I always, every time I read this book, have like this moment of like, damn, everyone I thought was a person is just super not a person, and everyone who I thought was not a person super is a person. Yeah. So like, you find out Wick is biotech. You find out that Rachel potentially came from an alternate dimension.
Yeah.
Borne is biotech, maybe, and also came from the alternate dimension. Mord is biotech that used to be a human being. And then there's also the foxes, who are definitely biotech, but are also exhibiting signs of like civilization.
Yeah, they're
and
evolving.
So like, right. And then like, I'm not really sure where the magician fits into all of this. It's like, the magician to me is always a person. Like, she never isn't really. Like, even when you meet her and she's like kind of this specter of terror and like stress, she's still just a lady. But
and we have also the mutant kids too.
The mutant kids, exactly. The mutant children, right? Like, those are the last like 5 pages suddenly become like lovable human beings and people.
My question, kind of to your question, is like, in the premise, are we talking about our definition of what a person is versus what a human is, you know, like a human person versus
a person
versus humanity, like having humanity, like humanity as a concept inherent to a person, like that, I think, is more the implication for me, is that it's like, poor Borne, yes, like, am I a person? But like, going back and forth on that those questions, I think it's more, for me, I kept reading it more as like, what perhaps Mr. VanderMeer was proposing is like, even if something
so formal.
Even if something isn't a person as you may define a person, they can still have humanity, and even things that you view as a person might not be necessarily a person, or in the case of Wick, somebody who you do view as a person isn't a person but is full of humanity in lots of respects, and is capable of feeling emotions and love and all of those things. To me, it's more of like a look at again, to bring it back to the like the loving of people and humanity, like the human element, like of the being, the ability to love and to care and to take care of each other is the more important thing here. We see Mord lose his humanity, right? And we see Borne gain his humanity and struggle with a force that's like against his humanity, and not, and knowing he has to kill but not knowing what to do about it. And then we have the magician, who is a person, but you see the humanity lost inside of her. And the kids who like attack Rachel have lost their humanity, but then without like the power that was corrupting them, they suddenly gain it back. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's more of the nature of like person versus humanity. I don't know.
I think, yeah, you nailed it. Like, there's just no, yeah, like I think that that's like beautiful and excellent, and like basically what I was hoping you'd say. Like, I think that like the fuckery that happens in the last 50 pages is like totally on purpose, where it's just like, boom, Wick is a biotech, boom, Rachel's from an alternate reality, boom, Borne is also biotech from an alternate reality, like, boom, Borne, like Mord was a person, like all of that is to get us to what I think you were saying, in that like it can roughly be summed up in the sentence like humanity and personhood are like intertwined but not the same thing and are complicated. And yeah, that's like one of the fundamental questions of the book, right? And you know that because Borne is constantly like,
and the Rachel becoming a ghost plot part is where she kicks Borne out, right? And her heart breaks, and then she no longer feels like a human anymore. She doesn't feel that part of her humanity anymore. Like, you know, we've all had our heart broken before. When your heart breaks, or you like lose love in your life in any way, it's like you don't feel like, I feel like it's most commonly described as like feeling like a shell of your former self, like that that emptiness inside. It does feel like you broke off like a little piece of your humanity and had to send it out the door with you. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. So valid.
Yeah.
Let's lighten it up, which is, who's your favorite character?
This was actually a hard question for me, because I was like, I guess Rachel ? But I really liked Borne, but I think now that we've been discussing, it wasn't so much as that I had a favorite character. It's more like I had a favorite two-character dynamic, which was Rachel and Borne together. Not necessarily like I had a favorite character, you know? I don't know. What about you?
Yeah. That's so valid. Mord.
Mord.
I just fucking love Mord. He's my baby. Poor baby Mord. Like, he just doesn't know.
Yeah.
You know? Like, he's totally an instrument of things going on around him that like are just not his little fault. Like, he didn't, like, it's unclear if he knew that he was gonna be a bear. It's like, and of course he's fucking psychotic. He's a guy that got turned into a giant bear. Like, obviously. I just love Mord so much.
I loved Borne too. I found him so heartbreaking.
Little baby. I know. Well, first of all, do you, when you read books, have a little movie?
Most of the time,
movie in there?
Yeah.
Okay. How's Borne doing in your little movie? How was that for you? Because he's so poorly described. Like, there are things that, like, concrete details, like his little ring of eyeballs and his, like, little tentacles, but, like, how that all fits together, I have, like, a really hard time.
So the book took on a cartoon quality with me to, like, make sense of Borne, right? I feel like I mashed together, like, 17 cartoons in my head. You know what I mean?
I just sort of was like, yeah, he's doing stuff. The easiest for me to picture was when Borne went shallow.
Yeah.
When he goes flat. And he like floats up
he's
stuff.
He's like a puddle. Yeah.
Like a little curtain. You know? Like he's just vibing. But I love, there's a part where he's like intimidating Rachel, like kind of on purpose, where he gets like, he goes shallow and goes up a wall and kind of like up the ceiling, and then there were just like two big eyes like staring at her, and that's the moment where I was like, I see you. But like a lot of the time I was like, yeah, Borne is looking like something. I don't really know.
I liked when Wick and Rachel were arguing and Borne was up in like the corner ceiling, like making little commentary up there. It was like when your parents fight
Wick is just like chucking alcohol minnows at him.
Yeah.
And Rachel's like, don't get him drunk. And Borne's like, like I,
Yeah.
I love that. And also like Borne is so goofy that like it takes no effort at all to imagine him going like, like that's his little vibe.
Yeah.
You know, he's a goofy little dude.
He is.
Are you gonna read Dead Astronauts?
When I looked
Yay
at
or
this
nay?
question before, I was like, nah. But now that we've talked, I'm like, maybe. But you said you started it and then you didn't finish it.
Truly, I just didn't fucking care. It's like, where's Borne? No one's there. Like, okay, so some main characters from Dead Astronauts that I remember are obviously the 3 Dead Astronauts. You get their backstory. Charlie X, who is mentioned in like one paragraph as a psychotic scavenger who's stalking Rachel. And that's like when she has her run-in with the magician, and the magician is like, I killed Charlie X. So you get so much fucking Charlie X, and it's overwhelming and not my cup of tea. And then also, though, this is the part about Dead Astronauts that I like almost stuck it out for, is that you hang out with the Leviathan.
Oh, okay.
And you get the Leviathan's internal monologue.
Okay.
So it's also a lot more of like, you're still rummaging around in the people humanity question quite a bit. And also adding a layer that's like, what is consciousness?
Yeah.
And so I do want to read the other one in this universe, like Borne.
The short story.
Something.
It's a short
Borne.
story, right?
Yeah. I'll read that.
Yeah.
Because I get more Borne. Yeah.
Okay, well, I feel like that wraps up our discussion. Do you have any last notes or anything?
Mord is not nice.
Mord is not nice. That's true. Yeah. And Borne is a person. Okay, well, Teddy, do you want to tell us what you're reading right now?
Yeah. So I'm reading Witch King.
Okay, nice.
I started. And it is like high intensity fantasy shit. Like, I will spoil this for you and everyone else. Yeah. It starts with one of those like character lists.
Oh,
like those are the first like 5 pages. So
is there a map?
Intense. Yes.
Okay, thank God. Needed a map.
Right.
Need a map.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm reading that and it's good so far. I'm also reading a book, The Reprieve by James Hon Matson, which is about a group of people who like goes into one of those like full contact haunted houses and witnesses an actual murder.
Oh.
Yeah. So I'll let you know how that one shakes out. So far, it's not a horror book.
Okay.
So far, it's just like incredibly literary.
Yeah.
But I'll hit you up. What are you reading?
I'm kind of in like a little bit of a slump. I'm gonna start reading Camp Zero very shortly, but
Great.
I am reading Making Sense of the Troubles, the story of the conflict in Northern Ireland by David McKittrick and David McVeigh. Yeah.
That doesn't sound dry at all.
Okay. I am trying to better my intellectual knowledge of other world history events, and this was like one all started because, first of all, Sam and I were planning a trip to Ireland for 2024. Not Northern Ireland, but Ireland. And then I was also watching Dairy Girls. And I was like, I feel like I have such nebulous knowledge of this topic where I'm like, it's a thing that happened, but I don't really know like X, Y, and Z like intricacies of it. So trying to learn. But it is, however, dry, yes. It's hard because my favorite nonfiction is memoirs. That's how I like to learn. But I really feel like I'm missing, like, the whole context. So, you know. But I did learn that Northern Ireland learned from the United States in this really fun way where they were like, let's redistrict everywhere. Let's gerrymander. And let's make our voting system not a pure popular vote system where it's harder to elect in a Catholic community. Like, you need more Catholic votes to elect in a Catholic community than a Protestant community. And I was like, well, boy, doesn't that sound fucking familiar? I'm like, oh, it's 1920. I wonder where you got that script from.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
I was like, great. This is familiar. So
I love watching American eugenics slowly take over the world.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, great. Where did you get your book?
Well, from you. From Elliot. So
okay, the catch-up begins.
That's
neutral.
That's 0, right? I was like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
It's 0.
Okay, I would say that's neutral.
I would like to apologize to Elliot on the air for never returning this book, so much so that Elliot had to buy a new copy.
I got my book from the library, so I get how many points?
1.
Great, excellent. So that brings the score from. So going in, we were at Sarah 3, Ted 1.5, because I had the unfortunate incident where I had to buy a darker shade of magic, and now it lives on my Kobo forever. And now we are Sarah 3 still.
Yes.
Ted 2.5.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Nice. Okay.
You're back in the game.
I am back in the game. Exactly. Trailing so closely. Okay. Last question for you.
Yes.
If somebody was like, I really like Borne, what should I read next? What would you tell them?
I would say, well, what did you like about Borne? Haha. No, then I would say if what you liked about Borne was the post-apocalyptic situation, and you liked the first-person narrative that almost kind of felt like a journal, but you were interested in more of the macro and a little bit less of the micro, then I would recommend Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. Feel like
Fab.
at the first act of this book felt very similar to that. So that's what I was thinking. Like a lot of the quotes, the setup were very parable to me of like how we got to the spot that they're in right now. So I went with that, but I don't think it's like the most accurate, like 1-to-1. Just depends if those are the things that they liked about it. What about you?
Mm-hmm. I similarly was like, well, if this was the thing they liked, I have thoughts. So my thing was like, if you liked alien consciousness and like weird fucking like ways of being, right? Embassy Town by China, again, Mayaville, Mayaville, somewhere in there, China. If you liked this like weird, like if you liked the Bornisms and you liked not quite being able to picture Borne and you were like, oh, I'm interested in this idea of like humanity in different ways or like what we call humanity but could be broadly applied to other things. Embassy Town is about a world in which like there are alien creatures that literally cannot lie. They can't even speculate and like how they communicate with human beings. Very interesting. To a lesser extent, you might also enjoy Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which is kind of about sentient spiders. You have to like spiders to get through that book. I know a lot of people with arachnophobia tendencies who would just be like, I'm outie. But it's a very similar thing of like, what does it mean to think and to be in a body that we don't typically associate with that? First book, Children of Time, you get that with spiders. Second book, Children of Ruin, you get it with octopi.
Who do think a lot. So
that's so true. They're so smart.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my thought. I agree with the parable analysis, I will also say.
You seem to go with the philosophy element with it, and I went with the literal post-apocalyptic vibe.
But that's great. Yeah. Now we have everyone covered.
Exactly.
Hopefully. Yeah. Okay.
Great.
Do you want to take us out?
Yeah, sure. So in 2 weeks, we will be reading Camp Zero by Michelle Min Sterling. So hopefully you'll read along and join us for that. And you can find us on social media at Shelving Cart on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And our email is shelvingcart@gmail.com.
Bye.
Bye.
1, 2, 3, 4. Shelving Cart. Shelving Cart. Shelving Cart. With Sarah and Teddy. Shelving Cart. Shelving Cart. Shelving Cart. With Sarah and Teddy. Hey!
Thank you for listening to Shelving Cart. Shelving Cart was created, written, and recorded by Sarah and Teddy, edited by Sarah, and the theme music is by Kate Gardine. If you enjoyed listening to our podcast, please rate and review us on any of your podcast listening apps. We greatly appreciate it.